Hi, I'm Sarah Brand, Director of the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting. We're excited to present Governor Katie Hobbs's executive budget that provides for an Arizona for all and moves our state forward. Staff from the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting will highlight Governor Hobbs's budget priorities in education, health and welfare, government that works, culture and natural resources, and public safety. Additionally, the office's economist will present on the economy and state revenues. Additional details on each of these budget topics can be found in the budget book on our website.
Hi, I'm Zachary Milne, economist and budget analyst. Prior to 2020, the Arizona economy was growing faster than the nation as a whole, attracting businesses and people alike seeking economic prosperity and a better life for them and their families. This economic strength carried through the pandemic, as the economic losses suffered in the Grand Canyon state paled in comparison to those losses suffered in other states. Since then, growth in Arizona has remained on par with that of the U.S., as demonstrated by the figure on the right. However, this fact obscures the true performance of the state. Examining growth over the pre-pandemic levels of GDP, a metric which avoids the bias in favor of states that were hit harder during the recession and thus recovered a little bit more quickly out of the recession, shows that Arizona's economy grew faster than all but 5 states during this time. In addition to the impressive overall GDP growth, incomes in Arizona are growing, jobs are continuing to flow into the state, and people are continuing to move here as well. These facts make clear that the Arizona economy is strong. Moreover, the continued movement and expansion of high-tech firms in Arizona should continue to foster economic strength moving forward. The labor market in Arizona and the U.S. more broadly has proven to be a significant bright spot in the economy. Job openings skyrocketed in 2021 and 2022 as businesses clamored to hire workers as the economy reopened. As of the latest data available, job openings have dipped slightly but remain near their historic highs, demonstrating just how robust the current labor market is. Speaking to Arizona specifically, employment has continued to rise in our state as well. As of the November jobs report, employment growth in Arizona sits at nearly 104% of the pre-pandemic levels from February of 2020. So put simply, jobs in Arizona have grown by nearly 4% since February 2020. Now, not an impressive metric in and of itself, but by comparison, the nation as a whole has only seen 0.7% growth in this same time period, just demonstrating how strong the labor market in Arizona really is. And as described in a previous slide, this growth ranks Arizona 7th amongst all states. More remarkable has been the growth in manufacturing employment in Arizona. Arizona actually leads the nation in manufacturing job growth in 2022, posting a resounding 8% growth between January and November of 2022. Now, this growth more than triples that of the 50-state average for all other states in the nation. And because manufacturing jobs typically have higher pay than other sectors, this bodes well for economic fundamentals in the state moving forward, such as income growth, consumption, and overall economic well-being. This should also help to support more growth in tax revenues for the state as the economy grows. Unfortunately, the economic growth we just described has been overshadowed by 40-year highs in inflation as well. Arizona has especially been hit hard by this wave of persistent price increases, posting some of the highest top-line inflation numbers in the nation, exceeding the U.S. as a whole and its neighboring western states. However, these top-line figures hide an important part of the story, which is that the exceptionally high inflation experienced by Arizonans currently can largely be attributed to the rapid growth in housing prices over the last 12 to 24 months. In fact, as demonstrated by the figure on the right, excluding the shelter category from inflation calculations brings the Arizona inflation number back down to level effectively with the U.S. and all other western states. While this residual inflation figure is still very high by historical standards, it demonstrates the particular challenges facing Arizonans and policymakers in 2023. Moving into 2023 and beyond, the likelihood of economic slowing and a possible recession are increasing. U.S. GDP growth was initially very strong coming out of the recession, but has since slowed, dropping to below the pre-pandemic trend. Now economists around the country are expecting more slowing and possibly a recession moving into 2023 as the Federal Reserve continues its battle to tame the 40-year high inflation. As interest rates continue to rise, consumers will find it more costly to make large purchases, and businesses will find it more costly to expand, carrying the potential to shift the economy into a recession. So with that, the executive budget forecast recognizes the economic strength of our state moving into 2023, while also remaining cautious given the potential economic headwinds that may lie ahead. Moving on, the executive budget includes several reforms aimed to ease the burden of these rising prices in Arizona. First, the executive budget includes 2 TPT or sales tax exemptions, one for children's diapers and another for feminine hygiene products, saving Arizonans an estimated $56 million a year in what would otherwise have been paid in state sales taxes. Second, the executive budget includes $50 million for a refundable child tax credit beginning in tax year 2023. Now, this credit will provide joint or head of household filers earning $40,000 or less, or single filers earning $20,000 or less, roughly $100 per dependent under 17 years old. Now, this averages to an additional $170 in the pockets of qualifying taxpayers come tax season. Shifting gears, general fund revenues in fiscal year 2023 have continued to surpass the estimates laid out in the fiscal year 2023 enacted budget. Through November, actual revenues have exceeded the prior enacted forecast every month and have totaled, this excess has totaled roughly $900 million in excess revenues. Now, while these figures represent exceptionally strong revenue performance, this growth is likely overstated due to the previously enacted income tax cuts. Specifically, taxpayers may have not adjusted their withholding rates or other tax information to reflect the new lower tax rates. This means that the state is likely to see some of this performance effectively go out the door in April come tax season in the form of higher refunds or just lower overall payments altogether. Now, the executive budget accounts for these likely revenue losses in our revenue forecast. The overall executive budget general fund revenue picture features falling revenues through fiscal year 2024, primarily due to the tax cuts I just described, which is the onset of the 2.5% flat tax. Beyond 2024, the executive contemplates very modest growth through 2026. Now, this growth represents cautious approach in light of the economic uncertainty we discussed in some of the previous slides, as well as a falling off of revenue sources such as corporate income tax revenues, which have experienced very high levels of growth in the last 2 years, which is unlikely to persist at those same levels in the future. General fund spending in this year's executive budget includes significant one-time investments, leveraging some of the large cash balances the state has accumulated in prior years to accomplish the executive initiatives. So for instance, in 2024, of the total $17.1 billion in total general fund spending, roughly 2.1 billion or 12% of that are one-time in nature. Beyond 2024, total general fund spending levels fall and remain near their 2023 enacted spending levels as displayed here in the chart. Now, in addition to the many other investments that the FY 2024 executive budget makes, it also includes $250 million deposit into the state's rainy day fund, bringing the balance to over $1.6 billion projected in 2024, or roughly 11% of projected revenues. Now, both of these balances or these figures represent the largest balance in the fund in state history. And this will help to ensure the state against revenue losses should a recession materialize in 2023. Now, before turning it over to my colleague Trey to discuss some of the education features of the executive budget, I'll provide a general spending overview of the budget. So beginning with an estimated $2.93 billion cash balance at the end of 2023, the executive budget includes $90 million in tax reforms that were discussed previously, $1.34 billion in new executive initiatives, and $37 million in executive baseline changes. All of this culminating in an ending cash balance in fiscal year 2024 estimated to be $273 million. Now, of the $1.34 billion in new executive initiatives, roughly 86% represents one-time executive initiatives, while the remaining 14% is for ongoing initiatives. Finally, the breakdown of the executive initiative spending for fiscal year 2024 is detailed on this figure to the left, with a significant portion going towards health and welfare, capital and infrastructure, bolstering the health insurance trust fund, and employee retention. It's important to note that the K-12 portion of this initiative spending is masked by reductions due to ESA programs and others, which my colleague will discuss later on. Excluding these negative spending adjustments for ESAs, the K-12 share of the executive initiative spending grows to actually 12.7% of overall executive initiatives, or 39% of total new spending. That includes baseline and initiatives. So next, my colleague Trey will discuss the education portion of the executive budget.
Thank you, Zach. Good afternoon. My name is Trey Nillis, and I am a budget analyst with OSPP. Now, with regard to K-12 education, the fiscal year 2024 executive budget recognizes the needs of Arizona's public schools, provides a framework for achieving critical goals, and supports the implementation of programs and measures designed to ensure Arizona students are prepared for the future. Passed during the 2022 legislative session, universal expansion of empowerment scholarship accounts, something that voters vehemently rejected in 2018, is on track to be a costly and unpopular expansion. Forecasts point to this expansion costing Arizona taxpayers an estimated $1.5 billion additional over the next 10 years. In response, the executive budget repeals the universal expansion and returns the program to its status prior to the 2022 legislative session, ensuring that families that use vouchers for children with special needs will still have access to their voucher accounts. This action will save taxpayer dollars from an underreported and unnecessary use while bolstering our public schools. Furthermore, the executive budget acts to ensure that all Arizona students receive the same monitored, reported, and evaluated educational instruction that is provided by the state's district schools. To accomplish this goal, charter schools, as well as ESA-funded private schools, will be held to the same reporting requirements as district schools. Expanding these requirements across the board will promote effective and appropriate stewardship of taxpayer dollars within the education system. The executive budget makes a substantial investment in K-12 education through $273.7 million in new state funding. Funding is provided for educator retention, dual enrollment assistance, modifying district additional assistance, and funding for broadband. These investments serve to achieve long-term goals for the success of Arizona students. Central to supporting Arizona's public education system is investing in the state's per-pupil spending levels. The fiscal year 2024 executive budgets are on pace to push per-pupil spending to its highest level on record, in direct support of educating and preparing Arizona students. Recognizing the substantial savings provided to the state through the repeal of universal empowerment scholarship accounts, the executive budget reinvests these funds into supporting Arizona's students and educators. First, the executive budget redirects $68.6 million designated for results-based funding and an additional $130 million in savings from the repeal of universal ESAs into the base support level for Arizona schools to put towards necessary resources to retain their critical education staff through the increase of the base support level for schools. As a result of the executive budget repeal of universal empowerment scholarship accounts, there is a correlated anticipation of higher than normal enrollment increases. In total, the executive forecasts a 1.25% increase in total enrollment across public schools. To fund this increase, $109.2 million in funding is provided. Recognizing the tremendous work placed on Arizona's educators, the governor's office will establish an educator retention task force that will develop a thorough framework for the steps that need to be taken to improve retention of educators in Arizona schools. This task force will examine class sizes, resources, working conditions, and all other variables that play into educator retention. The creation of this task force, along with the aforementioned additional base support level funding increases are the first steps in this governor's commitment to invest more in Arizona's educators, students, and long-term future. However, as the effects of learning loss from the pandemic continue to linger, students are in need of significant college preparedness support. To offer students a head start on the higher education, the executive budget includes $20.5 million for a new dual enrollment support and advancement program. The bulk of this funding is set aside for reimbursements to low-income students. Through these investments, Arizona will offer students the jumpstart they need to succeed after high school graduation. Additionally, as the resources on which schools depend continue to evolve, it is essential that Arizona schools have the infrastructure necessary to support this development. Chief among these needs is fast and reliable broadband services. To accommodate this need, the executive budget includes a one-time increase of $5 million to be utilized for E-rate. This is hosted by the FCC and will provide matching dollars to the state. Through these federally matched funds, the state can help public schools develop broadband infrastructure that meets students' needs. E-rate dollars for the state of Arizona have historically been drawn down at a rate of approximately 13 to 1. If this trend continues, the executive's $5 million investment could return an additional investment of over $60 million to transform Arizona schools. Now, calendar year 2022 saw the nation's highest inflation rates in over 4 decades. Per statutory requirements, adjustments for the base support level, charter additional assistance, and transportation support are capped at 2% and will provide an additional $177.9 million to schools. However, as schools attempt to stretch dollars of decreasing value, it is essential to reinforce critical funding on which Arizona schools rely for classroom resources such as textbooks, instructional materials, curriculum, and technology. Those resources are funded through the additional assistance formulas. However, currently, district additional assistance is not adjusted for inflation. The executive seeks to ease this disadvantage by tracking district additional assistance to 2% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. For fiscal year 2024, this amounts to an additional $10.9 million in district additional assistance for our schools. The executive also invests $2.4 million in transportation support for the schools for the deaf and blind. Now, I will pass it off to Duncan to address school facilities and higher education.
Good afternoon. My name is Duncan Spilsbury, and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. The School Facilities Division at the Department of Administration has 2 primary functions. First, construction of new school facilities, and second, building renewal at existing facilities. The executive budget includes $172.7 million to fund new school construction. Of this total, $140.9 million is for 9 schools to begin construction in FY 2024, as well as land and site condition projects. Additionally, the budget provides $31.8 million for 3 schools that began construction in FY 2023 and will be in the second and final year of construction in FY 2024. As for building renewal, the executive budget provides $348.9 million. And in total, this represents the largest investment in school facilities in at least 20 years. The executive budget introduces investments to improve equal access to higher education, makes strides in improving quality of post-secondary education in our rural communities, and better empowers the universities to prepare Arizona's workforce for the state's rapidly developing economy. The FY 2024 executive budget includes $80 million in ongoing funding capacity to improve equal access to higher education. Of that total, $40 million is to expand the Arizona Promise program, which provides tuition scholarships to low-income students who graduated from an Arizona high school with at least a 2.5 GPA. This expansion of the Promise program is projected to allow for funding for an additional 10,000 students to enter the program. Additionally, the FY 2024 executive budget allocates $40 million to establish the Promise for Dreamers program, which allows for full-cost tuition scholarships to any non-citizen Arizona high school students who graduates with at least a 2.5 GPA and has been enrolled in an Arizona school for at least 2 years. The FY 2024 executive budget also makes investments in supplemental aid to our community college and university system. The executive budget includes $14 million in supplemental funding for the 10 community college districts. This investment doubles the previous investment made in FY 2023 and will allow the rural community colleges to continue to invest in their academic mission and advance instruction for their student populations. The executive budget continues funding for STEM and workforce restoration and for new economy workforce initiatives. The executive budget also includes $15 million to address the shortfall at the Arizona Teachers Academy at the Board of Regents to ensure the Academy can provide scholarships at a consistent level.
Hello, my name is Alec Delano, and I'm a Grants Management Analyst at OSPB. The executive budget includes several items related to vulnerable and at-risk populations supported by the Department of Economic Security. $14 million is expected to the Adult Protective Services Program to backfill an expected loss in federal local funding and to increase current staffing levels. The National Adult Protective Services Association recommends a 1:25 average ratio caseload for investigators. The additional funding will empower the program to meet the growing reports of neglect or abuse. $4 million is dedicated to the Arizona Early Intervention Program to backfill provider rate increases previously funded with American Rescue Plan Act funds. $1.5 million will empower the department to draw down matching federal funds and strengthen IT security at the agency. The executive budget includes $146 million in general fund for caseload and capitation growth in the Developmental Disabilities Program. While increases to this program are expected each year, FY24 will experience a larger increase than what is typical due to reduction in federal matching dollars. The budget also includes $116 million in expenditure authority for home and community-based services programs. This is part of a 3-year plan associated with federal funds made available directly to DES through American Rescue Plan Act. Funding will continue to support direct care workers, IT enhancements, and other projects related to AHCCCS services. The Family First Prevention Services Act, or FFPSA, reduced the total amount of federal Title IV-E funding available to DCS due to a change in eligibility requirements. DCS saw the total number of Title IV-E eligible children drop from roughly 50% to 35% in FY22. DCS projects a further eligibility reduction from 35% to 25% in FY23. The executive budget recommends $10.8 million in ongoing GF funding to cover the total eligibility loss from 50% to 25% in FY24 and beyond. The government budget includes $11.5 million GF for adoption services. $5 million will be used to address an estimated 2.1% or 723 caseload increase in FY24. $2 million is necessary to cover a change in the funding formula in the Federal Adoption Incentive Payment Program award. $4 million will be used to pilot the Positive Parenting Program for adoptive or guardianship families. This chart shows the monthly caseload changes from month to month for DCS adoptions. As you can see, the first month of FY24 will see a caseload of roughly 34,500 children, while the first month of FY23 just saw under 34,000 children. This 2.1% estimated caseload increase is consistent with previous growth trends. There are 3 governor's executive initiatives to highlight the Department of Child Safety. First, the administration recommends that DCS receive an increase of 80 in appropriate FTE in order to allow the department to hire additional visitation and case aides. This will decrease visitation wait times for families. Second, the governor's office recommends that the Arizona Healthy Families continue its expansion with a $2.5 million GF increase in FY24. The Arizona Healthy Families is projected to impact 1,100 families in FY23. The additional $2.5 million will allow this program to serve an additional 300 families. Finally, the governor's budget recommends $2.25 million in ongoing GF to replace 50 aging vehicles in that department. Replacing these vehicles will help ensure that any children in DCS custody are transported safely. The executive budget includes a deposit of $150 million into the Housing Trust Fund. An included change to the statute governing the use of the Housing Trust Fund will allow these funds to also support Arizonans who are at risk of becoming unhoused. These funds are intended to be spent on utility assistance, emergency rental assistance, legal aid, a home repair grant for seniors, and other allowable uses. This $150 million deposit is a historic investment into the Housing Trust Fund.
Hi, my name is Cameron Dodd, and I'm a senior budget analyst at OSPB. The Arizona Healthcare Cost Containment System, or AHCCCS for short, provides healthcare coverage for over 2.5 million individuals. The current mainframe system supporting services for those members as well as administrative functions for the agency is over 30 years old. The executive budget includes $2.7 million to begin a multi-year replacement of the system. Of the $2.7 million, $2 million is for a systems integrator to guide development of the new system as well as lifetime support. $700,000 is to replace the first system modules in FY 2024. The executive budget includes $257 million to address access program caseload growth and changes resulting from the end of federal COVID-19 public health emergency provisions. Since March of 2020, Medicaid has been operating under special provisions related to the federal public health emergency for COVID-19. First, the federal government boosted its match rate for state Medicaid expenditures by 6.2%. In exchange for the enhanced federal match, states were required to keep members that joined Medicaid since March of 2020 on the program, regardless of any change to eligibility status. As a result, Access membership has grown from 1.9 million to 2.5 million people. The federal omnibus spending bill that passed in December 2022 set an end date for these provisions. The requirement to keep all members on Medicaid ends April the 1st, 2023. At that time, Access will begin redetermining the eligibility of all members. Ineligible members will be removed over the following 12 months. The enhanced federal match rates will be phased out over the course of calendar year 2023, reaching normal baseline rates on January the 1st, 2024. Additionally, the executive budget reduces the number of members expected to be removed from Access programs compared to the 2023 budget. The FY 2023 budget assumed that almost 100% of members that joined during the federal COVID public health emergency would lose eligibility for Access programs. The new expectation is that about 30% of members who joined in that time will remain on the program. Another important change is that Arizona's baseline federal Medicaid match rate is decreasing by 3.27% on October the 1st, 2023. And lastly, the executive budget anticipates a 4% increase in per member per month costs across all Access programs. The executive budget includes $463.5 million in expenditure authority for home and community-based service programs. This is part of a 3-year plan associated with federal funds made available directly to Access through the American Rescue Plan Act. Funding will continue to support direct care workers, IT enhancements, and other projects related to home and community-based services. The executive budget includes $6.1 million for the Arizona Department of Health Services to establish a grant program to increase the impact of family planning services for significantly more low-income individuals. The executive budget also includes $200,000 to provide pregnancy services that are inclusive of all options and support personal choice.
Hello, my name is Sarah Vargas and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. Next, my colleagues Nick, Kevin, and I will provide a summary of the Government That Works section. The executive budget includes innovative solutions for better government through broadband development, stewardship of capital assets, and a significant investment in state employees. The executive budget provides $205 million for major capital outlay projects at agencies throughout the Department of Administration and Department of Transportation building systems. Additionally, it includes $22.4 million in building renewal funding for the Department of Transportation and $114 million for the Department of Administration building system at large. This represents the largest building renewal investment in the ADOA building system in over 35 years. The executive budget includes $16 million to enhance broadband infrastructure at state facilities such as state parks, motor vehicle division offices, and Department of Transportation maintenance yards. This investment should reduce wait times at government offices, improve incident response times, and improve Wi-Fi at state facilities. ADOA will target Greater Arizona and seek to leverage state facilities as anchor institutions to connect local communities.
As you can see, broadband is a part of the backbone for society. Individuals and families utilize the internet for education, work, healthcare, leisure, and much more. The Federal Investment in Infrastructure and Jobs Act, IIJA, established the Broadband Equity, Access, and Deployment Program, commonly referred to as BEAD. BEAD is designed to fund broadband infrastructure in unserved and underserved communities all across the nation. In order to receive this BEAD funding, a recipient must provide a match of different funding sources. Therefore, the executive budget establishes the Rural Broadband Accelerated Match Fund with $50 million in funding, which is designed to assist non-state eligible entities to meet these match requirements. The RBAM fund will be a catalyst in leveraging federal dollars to deploy broadband infrastructure in the most critical areas across the state. The fiscal year 2020 budget provided funding and initiated an expansion project on I-17 from Anthem to Sunset Point Rest area. This project construction began in fall of 2022. Due to changes in federal law and increased construction costs, the project has an estimated $76.2 million shortfall. To address this shortfall, the executive has instructed the Arizona Department of Transportation to review the merit of legislative transportation projects included in the fiscal year 23 budget. For reference, the fiscal year 23 budget included 44 legislative projects for a total of $538 million. Since 1996, Phoenix has not had an interstate passenger rail service. The executive budget includes $7.5 million to be leveraged for federal support and funding in an effort to restore interstate passenger rail services to Phoenix. IIJA allocated funding to initiate, restore, and enhance passenger rail services throughout the country. This initiative is intended to be a catalyst for the state to partner with local entities in securing federal support and funding to restore interstate passenger rail service to connect central Arizona. The fiscal year 23 budget established the State Match Advantage for Rural Transportation Fund and is designed to assist with the costs associated with applying for and securing federal competitive transportation grants. This additional deposit of $25 million will ensure Arizona's competitiveness in drawing down these federal dollars to maximize resources across the state. Arizona's unique and astounding landscape attracts travelers from all over the nation and the world. Unfortunately, litter tarnishes this beauty and presents safety concerns for travelers, produces negative environmental impacts, and affects the tourism industry. The executive budget includes $3.1 million in additional base funding to provide monthly litter removal services on select interstate highways and highly visible routes throughout the state that currently do not have this litter removal.
Hello, my name is Kevin, and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. The executive budget is taking steps to modernize the state fleet and to make it more sustainable. It includes $15 million to install EV charging stations and advanced fuel infrastructure, which will reduce its negative impact on the environment. Additionally, the budget includes $10.1 million to replace 206 older vehicles located at 26 different agencies. ADOT has been instructed to prioritize advanced fuel options when purchasing new vehicles, making the fleet more environmentally friendly. The executive budget formally migrates the Arizona schools for the deaf and blind into the state fleet and removes their statutory exemption while instructing ADOT and Arizona Department of Child Safety to start developing a proposal to migrate their fleet into the state fleet in fiscal year 2025. The executive budget includes $20.8 million for the Secretary of State and the Independent Redistricting Commission to perform their election-related responsibilities and to strengthen Arizona's election laws, policies, and procedures. Of this amount, $11 million will address the objectives outlined by the governor's bipartisan election task force to promote transparency in the electoral process and improve election accessibility and accuracy. The executive budget includes $3.9 million for raises in the Child and Family Safety Division to address high caseloads and vacancies for attorneys and support staff to improve protection for children in Arizona. It also includes funding to backfill one-time funding sources so that the Attorney General can maintain current staffing levels at the Consumer Protection Section and the Criminal Division so that the Attorney General will be able to continue to advocate for the safety of Arizona citizens. Furthermore, the executive budget includes $674,000 for the Civil Rights Section to support 3 additional FTE positions and raises to address high caseloads and turnover and better protect the civil rights of Arizona citizens. The FY 2024 executive budget includes provisions to support the probation system in Arizona. Specifically, the budget includes $7.6 million for a probation stabilization fund to match county raises for probation officers as they are implemented throughout the year. It also includes $3.3 million to replace the outdated probation case management system used by all 15 counties with a new, more flexible system that allows for remote access. Additionally, it includes $1.3 million to support the automation costs of the courts, which allow most court processes to be accessed online. This funding will ensure that the probation system and the court operations can continue to run smoothly and effectively. The executive budget for FY 2024 includes $200 million in one-time funding for employee retention pay. It also recommends an assessment to compare the pay of state employees with market rates by job classification. Additionally, it will compare provider rates with the market and recommend solutions for disparities unrelated to job performance. Lastly, the executive budget includes a 10% salary raise for nursing and other targeted positions at state agencies to improve recruitment and retention. Additional raises are provided as needed to address compression and equity issues.
Hello, my name is Rob Aldis and I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. Arizona continues to face the challenge of the worsening drought in the western United States. This January, the Colorado River entered the next tier of drought status, resulting in a 592,000 acre-feet cut of water for the amount that Arizona can take from the river each year. This is a 21% decrease to the state's annual allotment. To begin addressing long-term water issues, the executive budget includes $20 million to help rural communities. Of the $20 million, $5 million is for statewide water resource planning. The Department of Water Resources will use this funding to help identify areas with groundwater shortages and to assist with local water resource planning. The other $15 million is for a grant program to help rural Arizonans, Latino and Indigenous communities secure certified well drillers to dig permitted wells. These communities often lack the resources to access safe drinking water, which is vital to community sustainability and health. The executive budget also includes $5 million of one-time funding to the Department of Environmental Quality to treat groundwater that is contaminated with PFAS. These chemicals are difficult to treat, leak into existing water sources, and are linked to increased rates of cancer and other health concerns. These chemicals have been identified in groundwater sources across the state with suspected contamination at additional locations. This funding will enable DEQ to expand on existing efforts to identify, contain, and treat Arizona's water sources for PFAS, thereby increasing the state's water quality. The state should be a model for sustainability and take efforts to increase the negative environmental impacts associated with the operating state government. To address this, the executive budget includes $7.5 million to install electric charging and advanced fuel infrastructure for public use at locations including state parks, motor vehicle division offices, Department of Child Safety, and Department of Economic Security customer-facing offices, and other highly used locations. In addition, the executive budget includes $15 million to install electric vehicle charging and advanced fuel infrastructure to support the state fleet. However, the executive budget does not stop there. The state is facing a decades-long drought that is creating a water crisis that will define our time. The executive budget includes $9.3 million to increase the water resiliency of the state, facilities, and properties. This initiative will emphasize replacing water-thirsty fixtures with low-flow fixtures and modifying existing landscapes by adopting zero-scaping principles that will include native plant species. The fiscal year 2023 budget included a monumental investment into the state park system. This investment is a combination to the Federal American Rescue Act plan monies allocated by the governor's office and state funding appropriated over the 3-year window. The executive budget includes the second round of funding for 7 projects that will enhance visitor experience and preserve the state's historical and cultural sites for future generations. These projects are displayed on the map. Public recreation, combined with the historic treasures of Arizona, is a hallmark of what makes Arizona great. The Heritage Fund is designed to provide grants to local and regional entities for park development, historic preservation, non-motorized trails, and outdoor recreation. As seen in the tables, the state's investment into the Heritage Fund has benefited approximately 50 projects, and the state's investment has been almost doubled in both years by matching funds. With this tremendous success, the executive budget includes a $10 million deposit into the Heritage Fund. The executive budget includes a $20 million deposit into the Arizona Arts Trust Fund, which is used by the Arizona Commission on the Arts to provide grants for nonprofit, governmental units, and community centers for the purpose of producing, presenting, teaching, or serving the arts. The deposit into the Arts Trust Fund increases the Commission's grant-making capacity by 400% and allows the Commission to expand its services to targeted communities and populations such as rural areas, veterans, and children.
Hello, my name is Caroline Dudas. I'm a budget analyst at OSPB. The executive budget provides $2 million to be used to conduct a systems assessment of the Department of Corrections. The study is intended to examine contracts, staffing levels, and retention issues at the department. The executive budget also provides over $69 million to continue supporting prison operations. Increased funding will be devoted to inmate food, overtime costs for prison staff, private prison contract adjustments, private prison salary adjustments, and additional costs due to the leap year in 2024. The Department of Corrections is responsible for maintaining its building system, which consists of over 1,500 structures having a total area of 8.8 million square feet. To improve the correctional environment and safety of inmates and staff, investments must be made to address required repairs and maintenance. Furthermore, the executive budget provides over $180 million for capital and building renewal projects. Of that amount, $65.6 million will be used for building renewal projects across the prison system. $48.7 million will be used for repairing and replacing prison fire alarm and suppression systems. and $66.8 million will be used to replace evaporative cooling systems at 4 prisons with HVAC systems. Fiscal year 2024 will be the second year of a 4-year plan to replace all prison evaporative cooling systems with HVAC systems. The Highway Patrol is underfunded for vehicle replacement, and most other Department of Public Safety programs have no vehicle replacement budget at all. In recent years, DPS has addressed those issues via diverting funding from payroll and replacing vehicles less often. The executive budget provides $11.7 million to lessen the department's reliance on vacancy savings and reductions in critical services to meet its vehicle needs. The DPS fuel budget is inadequate for DPS fueling needs given recent trends in fuel prices. The executive budget includes a $3.4 million supplemental appropriation in fiscal year 2023 and a $3.7 million appropriation in fiscal year 2024 to account for higher fuel costs and increased fuel usage. Proper funding will prevent DPS from having to utilize payroll from other programs to fund its fueling needs. Finally, DPS uniform allowances have not increased since fiscal year 2006. Since the fiscal year 2006 increase went into effect, general inflation has been about 52%. If the allowance does not equal the cost to purchase and maintain uniforms, employees must absorb the difference. The executive budget includes funding to increase uniform allowances to cover the majority of uniform costs. The fiscal year 2023 budget established the Major Incident Division within the Department of Public Safety. This division will conduct independent investigations of critical force incidents. A critical force incident means any discharge of a firearm by a peace officer due to a use of force encounter, or an incident involving a peace officer's intended use of deadly force, or use of force by any other means that results in death or serious bodily injury of another person, either during on-duty incidents or off-duty incidents while acting under the color of authority. At the request of a chief of police or a county sheriff, the division shall also investigate a criminal allegation against a peace officer employed by the chief of police or county sheriff. The fiscal year 2023 3-year budget plan included ongoing division funding of $17 million in fiscal year 2024 and $24 million in fiscal year 2025. When determining the implementation of the division, DPS planned on having 83 FTE positions in fiscal year 2024 and 110 positions in fiscal year 2025. The executive budget aligns with the 3-year budget plan and includes an additional $7 million in funding and 83 positions for the division.
Hello, my name is Remy Godin, and I'm a budget analyst with the Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting. Arizona Revised Statute Section 35192 creates the Governor's Emergency Fund, which reserves $4 million from the general fund for emergency response and recovery each fiscal year. The executive budget changes legislative language to raise from $4 million to $5.3 million the amounts of aggregate liabilities cap incurred under a declaration of disaster. Further changes to legislative language allow mitigation as an eligible activity for the Governor's Emergency Fund. This provision demonstrates to the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, that Arizona is investing in mitigation efforts. The executive budget includes $1 million in total funding over 5 years and establishes a new fund to meet state match requirements to draw down $9 million from FEMA for the Safeguarding Tomorrow Through Ongoing Risk Mitigation, or STORM Act, grant cycle. This $10 million in total funding will be deposited into a new STORM Act revolving fund and will be used to provide hazard mitigation assistance to local governments to reduce risks arising from natural hazards and disasters. The Department of Emergency and Military Affairs has experienced a substantial increase in the pre-award activities it may complete as a result of mitigation and infrastructure resiliency initiatives set forth by the federal government. In the last 5 years, FEMA's Hazard Mitigation Assistance Program has increased the number of grants available for funding from 3 to 7. The executive budget includes $925,700 in total funding over 2 years for DEMA pre-award grant activities such as community outreach, notice of intent development, and cost-benefit analysis preparation. This funding will allow DEMA's Division of Emergency Management to effectively control costs and take advantage of federal reimbursement of pre-award activities. The fiscal year 2024 executive budget provides $650,000 to increase support for automobile theft prevention, investigation, and prosecution. Funding is intended to supplement grants allocated to counties for vertical prosecution of automobile theft cases and to support ongoing efforts associated with the Department of Public Safety's Auto Crime Tracking Database. These measures will allow the state to better coordinate with local and regional law enforcement when investigating automobile theft and will help cover elevated fuel costs incurred by officers serving on the Vehicle Theft Task Force. The fiscal year 2022 budget established a body-worn camera program at the Department of Public Safety intended to enhance officer safety, improve agency efficiency, and promote public transparency. The fiscal year 2024 executive budget includes one-time and ongoing funding to establish a similar program for the 200 law enforcement officers employed by the Arizona Department of Transportation. These officers perform such tasks as commercial vehicle enforcement at ports of entry, VIN inspections, and registration compliance. Lastly, the executive budget includes $514,000 for the Address Confidentiality Program to backfill funding provided by the Federal Victims of Crime Act and state court revenues. This funding will ensure the Secretary of State can continue to provide critical and life-saving services to survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Now, our Director to provide acknowledgments and closing remarks.
Thank you again for watching the budget presentation. Governor Hobbs's budget makes real progress on the issues that matter most to the people of this state, and we look forward to working with the legislature to build an Arizona that works for everyone. Lastly, I'd like to acknowledge all the staff in the Governor's Office of Strategic Planning and Budgeting who have all worked long hours and made significant contributions to the executive's fiscal year 24 budget package. Most of all, I'd like to thank Bill Greeny, Deputy Director of OSPB, who retires at the end of this month, and who has served the Governor's Office for 27 years. Thank you, Bill, and enjoy your retirement.